annual meeting webinar. This is session 1 for us, and tonight our guest speakers are from the Colorado Department of Agriculture. And for those of you that don't know me, my name is Bobby Kettles. I'm the Executive Director for the Colorado Association of Conservation Districts. And just a little history of CACD for those who might not know. CACD represents all 75 conservation districts at the Capitol. And we also help with, you can go ahead and advance that for me, Mary, on my screen. Thank you. We also help with outreach and education through the districts and the different partner programs that we're involved in to help the local landowners. And with that, I would like to introduce our first guest speaker, and Commissioner Kate Greenberg. Welcome from the Colorado Department of Agriculture. Kate was appointed to serve as Colorado's first female Commissioner of Agriculture by Governor Jared Polis in December of 2018. As Commissioner, Kate provides leadership and direction to the Colorado Department of Agriculture, which serves producers operating more than 38,700 farms and ranches in the state of Colorado. She is a member of numerous state boards and commissions, current vice president to the Western U.S. Agricultural Trade Association, and secretary treasurer to the Western Association of State Departments of Agriculture. Commissioner Greenberg is the recipient of the Emerging Conservation Leader Award from Western Resource Advocates and a 2019 Who's Who in Agricultural honoree. She has worked in and advocated for agriculture for more than 14 years. Welcome, Kate, and with that, I will turn it over to you.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Bobby, and thank you for the invitation to be here with you all tonight. It's a pleasure, even though we're virtual. I'm glad we get to meet, and we just kind of roll with the punches these days. So I'm going to have a few remarks this evening, but before I begin, I want to first introduce members of my team from CDA who are here, who are going to be speaking later. We have Les Owen, our Director of Conservation Services Division, as well as Cindy Lair, Program Manager for the Colorado State Conservation Board. But of course, both Les and Cindy do a lot more than their job titles would lead you to believe, supporting our soil health initiative, really driving the voluntary stewardship work that we do across the department every single day. But before we get started, we are kicking off this evening with a very exciting honor and celebration to the Conservation District community. And I have the immense privilege of presenting the Commissioner of Agriculture's Award for Conservation Excellence this evening. So this award was created for CDA to acknowledge the exceptional contributions to on-the-ground conservation and leadership excellence. Due to COVID last year, we weren't able to give an award in 2020. So this year, we're making up for that, and we'll be presenting 2 awards, both to a Conservation District Board Supervisor and a Conservation District Manager. So without further ado, from behind your screen, please join me in honoring and celebrating these 2 awardees this evening. Our first award tonight goes to a Conservation District Manager who acted quickly and decisively during the East Troublesome Fire last year, the 2nd largest fire in Colorado history. And of course, recovery from this, just like any wildfire, will take years. But even while being evacuated and dealing with the constant curveballs this fire was throwing her way, Caitlin Miller, the district manager for Middle Park Conservation District, was already thinking ahead. From quickly updating the district website to be a one-stop shop for constituents, to obtaining grant funds within a month of the fire, to getting the first round of seed planted, Caitlin proved that determination, resourcefulness, and partnerships are some of the keys of success to help landowners in the aftermath of a catastrophic event. Caitlin quickly updated the district's Conservation and Natural Resource Services website so that became a central hub for all the services available to landowners. There were links for animal relocation, animal husbandry assistance, housing and food locations, and much more. And in the months following the fire, Caitlin continued to update the website with more resources, including a seeding program, tree seedling program, fuel reduction education, just to name a few. The Grass Seed program, in collaboration with Northern Water and the Grand Foundation's Wildfire Emergency Fund, provided free grass seed to victims of the East Troublesome Fire. And due to the extra time, hours, and space required for such a large endeavor, Caitlin is actually using her own home and facilities, like her barns, to store the material and ensure it's delivered to landowners within the district. Over the past year, the Middle Park District has given away 42,000 pounds of seed, valued at more than $150,000 to over 364 people. That equates to nearly 2,000 acres reseeded free of charge. Caitlin is also working with more than 40 federal, state, and local partners on watershed recovery, including a potential emergency watershed protection program project through NRCS. So please join me in congratulating Caitlin Miller. The second person who was selected to receive this award is Patrick O'Neill of the Mosca Hooper Conservation District. There were quite a few soil health enthusiasts and masters that helped the Colorado Collaborative for Healthy Soils and the Colorado Department of Agriculture develop the Soil Health Initiative and the subsequent STAR, or Saving Tomorrow's Ag Resources program, for local implementation. Patrick participated in nearly every science committee meeting and engaged directly with the development of the initiative. He troubleshot and provided expert guidance from the very beginning. He showed up and helped with the heavy lifting to make this program work for conservation districts. Patrick is also dedicated to teaching others about conservation. As a board member of the Rio Grande Watershed Conservation and Education Initiative, he has helped teach soil science at local high school soil health workshops. Patrick and the Mosca Hooper Conservation District also developed a large-scale vermicompost operation through numerous grants. They worked with 18 San Luis Valley farmers and the Soil Carbon Coalition to undertake the assembly of the static compost pile to produce high fungal compost for inoculation of agricultural soils. With that, please join me in celebrating Patrick O'Neill. It's such a treat to be able to honor Patrick and Caitlin tonight. I think their work is emblematic of the work that so many districts do across the state and so many producers and landowners do every day. And at the Department of Ag, we are here to try and lift up those local efforts every way we can. So I'm going to talk for just a few more minutes about some of the ways that we are working in just a cross sample of the work that we do every day. And I hope that you see the work that we do coming back to the local level, coming back to the district level, and the work of people like Patrick and Caitlin. For starters, I want to talk about climate, because this is the driving force and so much behind so many of the decisions that we are having to make to both build resilience in our agricultural communities and operations and help mitigate the impacts of climate change where we can. The state has put forward a greenhouse gas pollution reduction roadmap, and natural and working lands are a part of the strategy. Now, our focus at the Department of Ag has always been on voluntary and incentive-based solutions to the biggest challenges we face, and we remain committed to that. We have long-term and short-term goals as a state. As a state, we need to hit emission reductions targets. And that can both be a challenge for agriculture, it will be a challenge, but it can also be an opportunity. One of our short-term goals is building the Natural and Working Lands Climate Strategic Plan to help really get into the details of what it looks like for agriculture to help drive us toward these statewide targets. The timeline for this is over the next few months. We've been meeting with stakeholders over the month of November. We'll be putting together a draft this winter for public comment and review, and certainly welcome the input from the districts about how we can shape our strategic investments in natural working lands, again, to see agriculture as both a driver and a place where we're building resilience for our state of Colorado. The plan is going to then turn into action. Of course, last year, in the legislative session, we passed 2 bills. One was a department bill creating the Agricultural Drought and Climate Resilience Office. The second one was run by the Collaborative for Healthy Soils, essentially solidifying the work of the Soil Health Initiative in statute. So those are 2 examples of ways that we are orienting the department to support producers in being at the table, at the leading edge of doing what we can to mitigate and build resilience against climate change. Now, another thing we're talking about when it comes to the opportunities set forth, and if you'll go to the next slide, please, because as I mentioned, of course, there are challenges, there are impacts on agriculture, and there are also many opportunities for us, and that's the lens that we are taking at the Department of Ag. You know, we talk a lot about, of course, stewardship, conservation. You all and the conservation district community live that work of conservation every day. We want to build on that and find, in addition to these, investments that we're making from the state level, how can we help attract market drivers that support our producers in their stewardship? We're looking at, how do we, using our STAR program, Saving Tomorrow's Agricultural Resources, show supply chain companies that we are helping them meet their climate targets. We also get questions about carbon credit programs, for example, for producers. We want to be sure our producers here are positioned to participate in those programs should and if they evolve. We are not looking to build our own carbon credit programs, but we want to set up the ecosystem here where producers can take advantage of those market opportunities. Now, of course, in addition to that, we are going to be dealing with changes down the road. Of course, we are in a very dry winter right now. We are in our, going into the 3rd decade of a prolonged drought. Lots of pressures on our water, lots of pressures on our soil, and of course, lots of pressures on our producers. So as we think about what the future of our work looks like around climate, around drought, around stewardship, it goes back to that voluntary incentive-based focus where we get resources, both dollars, technical assistance, and research out to the field to support producers doing what you do best and expanding the work that we do around soil, water, and climate stewardship. Next slide, please. And of course, this all comes back to collaboration with conservation districts. At CDA, we help build capacity within the conservation district community, and hats off to our CDA team, of course, Les and Cindy who are here, and the other team members who may be listening in, but I think you all know who they are, support your work every single day. We continue to focus on, leading with collaboration on issues like soil health and soil conservation, which, as I mentioned, have been a huge priority of ours. This past year, we were also very successful in securing millions of dollars for conservation districts through the legislature. So we're going to bat for you downtown, telling the story of why conservation districts matter and what the opportunities for districts in the future are. Some of the dollars that we got, $15,000 for all 75 districts in stimulus funding. We have preferred eligibility for millions of dollars in soil health and drought relief funding, also through stimulus. We're working on additional efforts with our federal partners to make sure we're prioritizing the work that conservation districts do and getting money out into the field. We know how much that makes a difference for your capacity and ability to support producers and landowners in your districts. We are also, of course, always tracking the long bill and changes there. There are changes on the horizon, and the state, even though we have lots of stimulus money right now, the state budget in the longer term is going to run into challenges, especially around Tabor. So we need your help in making sure the conservation district community remains relevant in the legislature, that what we fight for as a Department of Ag around voluntary stewardship, soil, water, climate stewardship, supporting producers and advancing this critical work and attracting market partners to help make sure there's a premium for your stewardship. We need help telling that story downtown. Now, the last thing I want to touch on is with all of this new stuff, what does it mean for CSCB, for CACD? What does it mean structurally? Our structure is not going to change. We are trying to add capacity where we can. Conservation districts, for example, you have prime seats on the board that was created under the soil health statute that passed this last session. So you will absolutely be an integral part of that work. Our Agricultural Drought and Climate Resilience Office is a joint effort between the Commissioner's Office and the Conservation Services Division. We are actually just finished the process of hiring for a policy specialist who will really help get federal funds for that work. We don't have a lot of money ongoing for these programs, but we've got the skeleton in place. So part of their effort will be, how do we get federal funding over time here in Colorado for this work of drought and climate resilience? Currently, Jordan Beasley, our legislative liaison and policy advisor, is the interim director while we kind of work out what the longer term model will be for that. But of course, Cindy Lair, I think who you all know, and Les and their teams have been working very closely with Jordan on what the sort of future of that office will look like. So a lot going on at the department. This was a very small cross section. I want to say that the future of our work really, I think, comes back to, again, that collaboration and our ability to learn from you, to lean on you, because you live the work every single day, especially at the local level. So again, congratulations to Caitlin and Patrick tonight for being honored, well-deserved honor. And I hope you know that the work you do every day back at home reaches us at the state. And we couldn't be more grateful to have you and your partnership in this work that we do on behalf of agriculture. So with that, Bobby, the last slide is opening for questions. So I will leave it to you. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Greenberg. If anyone has any questions, please raise your hand and Mary will unmute you so you can ask your questions, or you're more than welcome to put your question in the Q&A or the chat.
And it looks like there was a lot of celebration in the chat as well, which I just caught up on for Patrick and Kate.
Yes. Definitely. I don't see any questions. Just congratulations to Caitlin and Patrick. Do we have any questions?
Well, I was going to say, Bobby, when you think of the hardball questions out there, just give them to Les and Cindy and they'll be able to handle them.
Okay. Sounds good. Sounds good. Well, if nobody has any questions for Commissioner Greenberg, I will let her off the hook, and we will. I will introduce our next speaker. And of course, everybody knows Cindy Lair, our program manager with CDA and the Colorado State Conservation Board. Cindy manages the Colorado State Conservation Board and other conservation programs for the Colorado Department of Agriculture. The CSCB provides financial support and statutory oversight to the 75 conservation districts within Colorado. A natural resources management graduate of Colorado State University, Cindy coordinates the department's implementation of a state soil health program and works closely with partnering agencies and conservation districts to ensure focus on incentivizing innovation and voluntary conservation. Cindy is an alumni of the Colorado Agricultural Leadership Class of 2014. And with that, Cindy, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Bobby. Well, it's a pleasure to be here tonight. I'm sorry we're not able to meet in person, but that's just kind of the way it goes for tonight. I'm going to show some slides in a minute. I was given a few things that the CACD board asked me to cover, and a lot of those have to do with the soil health program and the implementation of some of these things. I want to start out by recapping something that has been going on a long time and has at some point come down to the state of Colorado, and that is the National Conservation Planning Partnership. And that has been a program that has involved all partners in this conservation partnership. And just this year, Colorado NRCS had started to work with the partners CACD was there, Department of Ag and CSCB was there, among other players. And the goal is really to think more about conservation planning. And over the years, and I don't want to steal NRCS's presentation or anything like that, but what I wanted to bring up about that is we're facing a tremendous opportunity for the districts to be able to provide more assistance to this conservation partnership through hiring conservation planners. I encourage you at your district level to talk to your resource team lead about what those conservation planning needs are for the office. Chances are, maybe they're already covered by NRCS staff, but it's very possible that they could really use some additional help. And so having that conversation with your local NRCS team and also figuring out how that might look, because we do have this wonderful district conservation technician program, and it's fully able to work with conservation planners. We have had a few conservation planners work for districts over the years, and we're working, I say aggressively, but we're working really hard. Clint Evans has been leading this charge from an NRCS perspective to look at the training needs and to figure out how we can do better at making sure all of the conservation planners that are out there, whether they're NRCS employed or district or state employed, however that looks, we want to make sure that they're getting the right amount of training and they don't have to wait. And we've had a lot of challenges over the years with not enough training opportunities and spots when we do have training. So I just wanted to encourage you to think about that at your local level, because it is an opportunity to bring more value and meaning to the output in that office, because NRCS really does want to get back to this place of having more emphasis on conservation planning before starting to do other things like equip contracts and stuff like that. So I'm going to leave that alone for now, but just wanted to put in a plug because I really believe in what this could have in store for you and your local partnership and the landowners that you work with. So I was asked to talk more about the soil health program, the STAR program. Many of you may have heard me talk about it over time. I was at NACD in 2020 and in Las Vegas, and I heard Illinois Association of Conservation Districts talking about the STAR program. They've been using it for water quality. But what I liked about it is that it is a way for districts to lead an effort to help producers with conservation planning and with, and in their case, it's water quality. In our case in Colorado, we thought it would be great to adapt that program to the soil health program. And so that is the mechanism by which the conservation districts are able to deliver it. And we felt very strongly when we started working on a soil health initiative that we wanted conservation districts to be able to deliver this. Because when we think about why conservation districts are here and the founding principles that created conservation districts, it's about soil. And it's about soil and it's about soil conservation. And, some people get wrapped up about, hearing the term soil health. I don't really think of it in any other terms than soil conservation, actually. So to me, it's what conservation districts were made to do, and why would we want to partake in that with anybody else but conservation districts? The good news is we're doing it with conservation districts, and we're doing it with other entities out there that have been wanting to help us. We have Colorado Corn that's been very, very connected with this whole process. We have the Audubon Conservation Ranching Program, Dusty Downey, some of you know him, to help with that ranching side of the STAR program. And then we also have the Dolores Water Conservancy District down in the lower Southwest to be able to work on this. So I want to tell you that we have a regular STAR program and we have STAR Plus. And what we started with the conservation districts and the application process that we had this fall is really for Star Plus. We were able to get funding, stimulus funding. We got $2 million to put to work in a hurry in the year 2022 to make it available to conservation districts. And one of the things we wanted to do with that was to bring more ability for capacity building, because we know a lot of districts would like to be doing more. They just need more capacity to function. And so with that, we have funding that is helping those conservation districts, as well as funding that goes out to the landowners that they sign up to participate. And then also they get, the participating conservation district is going to get $2,000 per producer, 5 producers that they get to work on their own field or on their own ranch for improving their soil health. So essentially, the STAR program really is it's a self-assessment tool, and it is. I'm going to my my slides here. Hopefully, you can see them. Are you able to see them yet? Okay, thank you, Les. And we are okay. So the STAR program, like I said, is a way for the districts to be able to have something that it's a structured framework to be able to work with their producers on this planning and meeting the producer at their level, finding out what they want to do different. If this isn't something that would go to somebody that's not interested in soil conservation. This would go to a producer that says, I am kind of interested in building resilience. I do see more drought coming, and I need to figure out what I can do to make my own soils more resilient in the face of increasing drought we've been experiencing. And so so we have that program that works with the conservation districts. We also have the regular STAR program that's more of that self-assessment for a producer that might want to look at his or her activities on their own farm. They get a soil test, a free soil test for up to 100 producers that would want that. And then also they would get a STAR field sign to go up on their fence to show passersby the work that they're doing for ecosystem services and things like that. As we all know, there's so much negativity out there about what agriculture may or may not be doing. And I think we need to be tooting our horn a lot more. And this gives producers one more way to be able to demonstrate and show off some of the things they're doing. It gives bragging rights. And so it is a 5-star program. I'll get to that in a minute with my slides, but some of the background here on the development of the STAR tool is that the Colorado Collaborative for Healthy Soils and many other groups were part of this House Bill 21 1181. And so that didn't have any money with it, but it did set up structure for the Department of Ag to be working on on delivering a soil health program. And then also the Senate Bill 21-235 gave $2 million for the soil health initiative as well. And so we have a lot of other funding opportunities that have come to be. We've written a lot of grants. We have a 319, which is a non-point source water quality grant through the water quality control division. And we've also gotten a water plan and conservation partners program grant. So there's Conservation Partners Program, which is through the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. And then we also got a water plan grant from the Water Conservation Board. And then just recently, we found out that we got a Conservation Innovation Grant from NRCS. That's $2.5 million. That's the biggest one yet. It's very exciting to get that. Thank you, Clint, and the rest of NRCS for that. And then one recent activity that we've been working on is the Healthy Soils Challenge, which is a market opportunity for the STAR program. At the bottom of the application form for that, there will be a checkoff for producers that might be interested in making more money on top of what they're already getting, whether it's through EQIP or whether it's through what the district is offering through the STAR Plus program. This zero food print, I won't go into it now, but it deserves another presentation, maybe during a coffee hour or something like that, to talk more about it. But it's getting restaurants to charge a fee, a 1% fee that will go towards paying local farmers and ranchers for conducting conservation on their land and building soil health. It is a Healthy Soils Challenge, so the work that would be done through that is going to be right in alignment with the STAR program, and also it's not even going to be additional. It's actually going to just be it won't be additional work. It'll be an additional payment to layer on. So we think producers will like that, and also it is one of those first time opportunities to be able to look at some of these market approaches to private and public partnerships for conservation. And so there are people out there that really don't want to participate in federal or state conservation program funding, which is fine. This is one of those opportunities where this is going to be fully private as far as where the funding is coming from, and it will be a market opportunity, which I think is a good chance to start getting one's feet wet in that type of an area. Because if we can work at layering all of these additional financial benefits for the good conservation work that's being done, it's society benefits as well as the producer. And as John Stolp always said, if we can make it so it pays, people are going to do it for a lot longer. And so that's what excites me about the Healthy Soils Challenge that we're getting ready to work on. But the basic STAR in Colorado is that we have croplands and grazing lands, we have orchards and vineyards, and most of it is geared off of a field by field basis. It's not requiring a farmer to put his whole farm into the STAR program. It would be one field that they could work on. Now, on the ranching side of it, it is going to be different. Ranches are a completely different animal, and we're really interested in keeping the ranch grass growing productively and helping more with conservation planning, drought planning, monitoring, and things like that. So it is more of a whole ranch approach than what we're doing with croplands. But I just wanted to show you that and let you know that when we're talking about one star, that is really what 80% of the fields of that type are doing in that region or area. And so a lot of people are going to come into it with one star, and then getting 2 stars is going to be a field that's beginning to implement different soil health practices. And I have a slide here pretty soon that's going to show the 5 accepted practices for principles of soil health. But for now, I'm just going to keep going through these different stars and what they mean. 3 stars is great. It's a field that's implementing multiple soil health principles. And excellent is 4 stars. 5 stars is ideal, and it's going to be a field that's implementing all 5 soil health principles, which isn't always possible. So we want to caution the conservation districts that are working with this, as well as the producers, not to expect just to automatically get 5 stars, because it's going to take a while to get to that point. And so here are the soil health principles. This has been established by NRCS, and we felt like from CDA's perspective, this is a partnership between conservation districts, NRCS and landowners and Department of Ag and the State Conservation Board. And so we really feel like embracing these 5 soil health principles is the way to go. And soil armor, protecting the soil, having some residue, minimizing soil disturbance, no-till systems, plant diversity, which comes around to meaning crop rotation, expanding the opportunities for crop rotation if possible. And then to the greatest extent possible, having a continual living root. And I was over on the West Slope in Fruta last week or right before Thanksgiving, and got to see Lowell King's cover crops that he was doing. And here we are almost in December, and he's got actively growing cover crops, good roots in the ground. And so it can be hard as winter progresses to keep those living roots, but to the extent possible, I think it is something that we strive for. And then also, lastly, livestock integration, being able to have livestock in that system, especially, obviously they're going to be in the system for ranching, but especially for croplands, because that we're finding is able to increase that cycling and nutrient cycling more quickly. And CSU has done quite a bit of research on this, and finding that it will actually hasten this process of building your soil microbiome. And so here is what we're actually looking at. We have 10 field forms. It's taken us a while to build this up because, we're borrowing this from Illinois, and Illinois agriculture is really different from Colorado agriculture. We took on more than we could probably buy. We bit off too much, but we did it. And really thankful for Colorado State University for helping lead this, and also Helen Silver, who has done a great job of organizing this. But these are the different field forms that we have. We felt like they helped, that they addressed all of the different farm systems that we have in Colorado. And then we have 11 score sheets. The reason we have 11 and not 10 is because we have different systems, whether they're dry land or irrigated, and we wanted to make sure we treated them differently because, as you're well aware, dry land systems are going to be a lot more difficult when they're water challenged to be able to work on soil health. And so they just come with their own limitations, and we want to acknowledge that. And so here is what the field form looks like, and this is just a snapshot of part of it, but it does go through a pretty rigorous questionnaire, and this, especially for the STAR program, it's something that the producer can do on their own. They don't need to go through it with anybody else. They can go through it with their conservation district, their local NRCS office, and things like that. This can be a great segue into conservation planning as well. So I'm kind of excited of the timing of this with the National Conservation Planning Partnership, because I do feel like they go hand in hand. And then quickly to go through the operational flow of it, the conservation districts applied to take part in this, and we had 22 conservation districts apply. We had placeholders for 16. We wanted to get one more in there, so we readjusted our budget so we could get a 17th district in there. And we also have these 4 eligible entities that I mentioned earlier as I was introducing the topic. And then the selected districts can sign this scope of work and also get an agreement with the State Conservation Board and the Department of Ag to receive the capacity support, which is $20,000 per district. And then also the districts are going to identify 5 to 7 producers to work with. We are dispensing the incentive payments to the districts to distribute to the landowners that they're working with. There are different incentive payments to the producers. And the good news is, if that producer is also working on soil health through NRCS and EQIP or CSP, they fully work together. So, you know, it's really nice to be able to offset the costs to the producer. And I know no program offsets all of the yield reductions that sometimes you experience, or just the costs for cover crop seed and things like that. So it's really nice that these incentive payments can be layered quite easily with NRCS funding that comes through EQIP or CSP. So anyway, the districts are going to perform an initial consultation and collect soil samples and complete a consultation form with the producer. The district is going to turn in producer match forms to CDA, because there will be some match requirement from the producer on the funding that they get through this. And then, like I said, the Department of Ag will dispense those incentive payments to the districts for distribution. And soil health for rangelands, I kind of talked about it a little bit before, but all of these are 3-year processes. And in year 1, there is that initial consultation with the rancher, and the rancher has identified their own goals for improvement and opportunities, looking at the risks. They do a visual assessment and take soil samples, and then the rancher is going to be able to get a star rating for that. And then they will identify different practices or infrastructure that could be installed for improvement on the ranch. And then the rancher is also provided resources for conservation and drought planning if they don't already have that in place. Year 2, there's a consultation with the rancher to assess the successes and challenges in participating in this program, more visual observation, and adjustments made if needed. And then finally, in year 3, there's a final consultation with the rancher to assess successes and challenges. And then hopefully at the end of that year 3, or through that process in year 3, there will be a new star rating. And that's the idea. You know, there's a certain star rating you'll get when you start out, but at the end of the 3 years, hopefully we're going to see more stars on that rating. And you know, we look at this as kind of bragging rights in a way. And then eventually it's coming down. Farm product purchasers are going to be paying participating producers a premium for some of these beneficial practices. And some people say they're just going to expect it. And so it's hard to say exactly how it's going to turn out with some of these market opportunities, but and how some of the commodity purchasers might be able to compensate or pay a higher premium for some of these sustainably grown crops. And so we're just kind of excited to see where that goes next. We want to get the program up and running first, and then we're going to be working hard at creating more of these market opportunities. And I mentioned that Healthy Soils challenge with the Zero Food program. That is the first opportunity for some of these market programs to work. And so I will stop sharing my screen there. I want to make sure I don't talk too much longer in case you have questions, but somebody was asking me to speak to what my role would be in the AdCro program, in the AdCro office. And just to remind you, AdCro stands for the Agricultural Drought and Climate Resilience Office. And Commissioner Greenberg spoke to it in her presentation, the fact that we have a policy analyst that we've just recently hired. Her name is Kristen Boyson, and she's going to be starting work with the department in the AdCro program or office on December 20th. And so it is truly a collaborative opportunity between the Conservation Services Division and the AdCro office. As Commissioner Greenberg spoke earlier, it's not, we're not restructuring anything in the in the Conservation Services Division to be able to work on the AdCro. It's just going to be more of us working together to achieve the goals for fundraising and working towards our registering our accomplishments for the greenhouse gas reduction roadmap that we talked about earlier. And I think I'm going to stop at that and see if there are any questions before we move on to letting Les present.
Thank you, Cindy. Thank you very much. If anyone has any questions, please raise your hand and Mary will unmute you. Or you can put your questions in the chat. Somebody has to have a question for Cindy. Don't let these ladies off that simple. We don't want to dump it all on Les. Okay, Cindy, it looks like you're going to get away with no questions tonight. Thank you so much for your presentation. That was great. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Last but not least, we have Les Owen. And hold on just a second. Les is the director of the CDA Conservation Services Division. And Les has been the Conservation Services Division Director with the Colorado Department of Agriculture since 2016. He provides oversight and coordination of the department's efforts to protect and enhance the state's agricultural activities as they relate to land use and range management, conservation, soil and vegetation management, grazing on public lands, water quality and quantity, wildlife habitat, and endangered species. The division also provides administrative and financial assistance to the 75 conservation districts and oversight and administration of the noxious weed-free forage, biocontrol insectary, groundwater, chemigation, and renewable energy programs. And Les moved here from New Mexico, where he worked for the New Mexico Department of Agriculture on a variety of issues related to federal land management, threatened and endangered species, and other rules and regulations that affect natural resource management. He was raised near the small town of Corona, New Mexico, where most of his time was spent working on the family ranch. Now I'll say that twice. That was a mouthful. Les, with that, I am going to turn it over to you. And we can go ahead and put Les up on the big screen live.
Oh, wow. I don't
If
know.
we can.
It might be better to just leave the slide up there. That's
Can,
I'll leave
Mary,
that
can
up
we-
to y'all, but I wouldn't want to stare at my bald head for a while. But appreciate the opportunity, Bobby, to visit with folks. I'll echo what Cindy said earlier. I sure wish we were all in person in the room and could have a conversation, have some presentations and some hallway conversations afterwards. But this is the way things are now. So we'll make do and definitely have a rain check to see all of y'all down the road in person somewhere and shake hands and do some catching up. But had a handful of things that I wanted to cover this evening. And I think one of them I certainly wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about the wolf program in Colorado and CDA's involvement in that. I think I'll actually leave that until last. Go over a few other things that probably won't elicit as many questions, and then we can take as much time as we need on that one. Following kind of along, and as I'm going along, if folks want to throw a question in the chat, I'll try and pay attention to that with a question as we go, or you can that way we can address the questions, but we'll certainly have time at the end as well. Wanted to give a quick update on some of the stimulus dollars, that Senate Bill 234 that created the one-time ag drought relief fund, a $3 million pot of money, and where we're at with that. Of course, all the districts received a $15,000 payment with that. That was directed by the legislation, and then the remainder of that money was given to the department to to grant out to build drought resilience. And there wasn't a whole lot of sideboards other than that, besides water projects, range related projects, post wildfire projects, or any other drought related activities. So pretty wide open. So I just wanted to give a quick update on what we did with those dollars and where we're at on that. Throughout the hearings that went on for that particular bill, there was a lot of discussions about technical assistance and CSU's role in that, and federal lands, and how those things are important, and how we might. So there was a piece of the money, about 250,000 of that we directly assigned to some projects. The department by statute is connected to the boards of district grazing advisors around the state. If you're from a little bit of federal lands history, it goes back to the Federal Land Policy and Management Act created grazing advisory boards in all of the historic grazing districts that go all the way back to the Taylor Grazing Act. Long story short, those federal advisory committees went away, and in Colorado by statute, they kind of continued that role through these grazing advisory boards, which there's 4 active ones in the state that cover, well, better than half of the state. They cover a tremendous amount of it. And their duty pretty much is to direct the grazing fee dollars that come back to the state and to each of the counties and grazing districts to spend those on rangeland improvements that all by nature increase the resiliency of that area to drought. So long story short, we provided some funds to each of those grazing advisory boards to help with, of course, they depend on funding from grazing fees on federal ground, which have been down for several years due to drought. So we gave those guys a shot in the arm. And then also to our partners at CSU, we provided some funding to help grow the capacity of the Drought Advisors Program, which kind of see as an investment into the future, where this program will continue to grow and continue to provide some technical assistance. Also, through the Water Center at CSU, a watershed assessment and vulnerability evaluation program that Blake Osborne is trying to get going. And what this does is provides training to local folks so that they can do these assessments to private landowners post-fire. So it gives them a real kind of quick and very useful evaluation of the fire impacts on their private ground and what conservation measures that they may want to, or restoration measures that they may want to pursue after that. And the other project that we chose to invest in was with the COAGMET weather stations that are scattered throughout the state, was the installation at 10 of those sites, some soil moisture probes added onto the site, along with the ability to make this data available, this soil moisture data available to folks through a data portal. So those, we have contracts in place for those, but there was about $1.5 million of that money that was left over that we put in a competitive grant pool. And we had over 90 applications totaling about $8.1 million worth of requests. So it was very, very difficult to go through and sort those. There were more than 90 good projects there. It was just a limited amount of dollars. And we've just in the last week or so started working with the 22 projects that we're able to fund partially or fully. And a couple of those were some conservation districts that put in some supplemental requests. So lots of good work being done on that. And we're working on getting those contracts in place for the competitive grant portion. Beyond, if there's anybody has any questions about that, just throw them in the chat and I'll come back to them. Otherwise, I'll kind of keep moving on through some regulatory changes that have been happening at the federal level and how they're may impact Colorado. A lot of it is kind of a wait and see game. The waters of the United States has been a constant issue, a constantly changing issue since I got involved in kind of natural resource policy 20 years ago. and it never ceases to keep us going, keep us on our feet. Of course, during the prior the Trump administration, there was a navigable waters protection rule that was put in place, and with the coming of the Biden administration. So I just had a question come in about, has CDA notified all the awardees of the competitive grants? And yes, at this point, an email notification should have gone out. So if you haven't heard anything, shoot me an email, and I'll get back with you on that tomorrow, Susie. So please, if you haven't heard anything and you're expecting to, just shoot me an email, and I'll get back to you tomorrow, and we'll figure out where things are at. So with the waters of the U.S., there's a two-step process that EPA and Army Corps have announced now. First, and this is kind of a repeat of a few years ago under the prior administration, they're going to roll back the existing rule, and so this would put us back to pre-2015 WOTUS regulations. And then step 2 will be to modify that some more, and what those modifications are, time will tell. So in the meantime, we're basically back to where we were prior to the Trump rule going into effect, which in Colorado, due to some of the legal action that was going on, it was in effect for only a very short time. And so things haven't changed a whole lot. I say that with one caveat, and this one really was specific to Colorado. There was a memo that came out from Army Corps and EPA back in 2020 that changed the way they interpret the recapture provisions for wetlands and waters of the U.S. And what it really impacted was projects that converted irrigation ditches to a pipe. Prior to that memo, there was a two-step kind of test where the Army Corps would assess whether the project was a change in use of the waters and a reduction in the reach of the waters. And with that two-part test, many ditch to pipe projects were still considered exempt from needing a permit under the Clean Water Act to move forward. Well, that memo basically said if it's a ditch to pipe project, it automatically triggers both tests and does require a permit. Since that time, and I believe that we discussed this a little bit last year, even the region of the Army Corps that handles Colorado has issued a regional general permit. I believe it's Regional General Permit 5 that provides a general permit for those types of projects, which makes it much easier in Colorado for those to move forward. This became effective July 30th of this year and is good through 2024. So we're actually in better shape with regards to having a general permit and not having to go through the national permitting process to get some of those moving forward. So I'm sure that's clear as mud. I guess the takeaway from that is, if you are doing a ditch to pipe project and it's on a ditch that is likely jurisdictional or maybe jurisdictional, just visit with the folks at NRCS. They're very well aware of this, and they'll kind of know where things are at. But just make sure that you don't get caught without a permit when one's needed. Making a few phone calls can sure save you a lot of headaches in the long run. Some other regulatory changes that are coming down are related to the Endangered Species Act. Again, kind of the same thing. There's a very stark change in direction at the Washington D.C. level from the prior administration, and some critical habitat rules that were promulgated under the Trump administration have been rolled back and are being redone. And these are specific to, there was a definition of what is habitat and what is required for habitat to qualify under the Endangered Species Act. And this related to a Supreme Court case involving the dusky gopher frog, I believe, and how areas that weren't biologically capable of supporting that particular frog species were designated as critical habitat. Well, the Supreme Court found that was that was not right, and should, you know, so kind of sent them back to the drawing board. And so the prior changes were meant to address that Supreme Court decision. So that's being rolled back, and they're going to take another look at it. So be on the lookout for those, and just see, we'll have to kind of look at them and assess what they're coming out with. But it's certainly another change that's being rolled back from the last couple of years. Another one are the Council on Environmental Quality, the CEQ regs, that direct the agencies in how they do their analysis under the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA analysis, which reinstates the requirements that they must consider direct, indirect, and cumulative impacts. It took away some of the time and page limits that they put on the agencies. Of course, if you're familiar with NEPA, that while they may have only written 150 or 200 page EIS, they still had 500 or 600 pages of appendices. So the actual changes, we'll kind of have to see, but there'll be a step 2 on the CEQ regs where they go into some broader changes regarding public involvement, trying to gain some consistency across the agencies. Of course, the devil's in the details, so we'll have to take a look at these when they come around and get a little bit closer to us, and see what they look like, and engage at that point. And I'll certainly try and keep as we get information on this here at the department, make sure and send that out to the district so that y'all are informed. And the other one I wanted to just very briefly touch on is greater sage grouse is coming back up again. That if you'll recall, back in about 2012, 13, 14, started revising all of the BLM resource management plans that have greater sage grouse habitat. Well, it's been finalized 2 or 3 different times. Well, they started scoping on that again, and they're going to look at all of the different threats and whatnot that can impact greater sage grouse. Livestock grazing has been mentioned into it, so we're certainly going to engage with BLM in that effort to make sure that we don't get any overly burdensome requirements for the livestock grazing permits and greater sage grouse habitat. And with that, I'll jump on over to the wolf and where we're at. So with the passage of that ballot initiative last year, it answered the question of, will wolves be reintroduced? And yes, they will. And it set a time frame for it, and some other parts of the process. And CDA is participating in the technical work group, or TWIG as it's called in acronym world, and Wayne East from the department's animal health division is representing the department there. And Commissioner Greenberg has a seat on the stakeholder advisory group that I've been representing the department at up to this point, and give you a little bit of kind of an update on where things are at there. First of all, the overarching, I guess, caveat with these groups is these groups were put together by CPW to make recommendations. And so the recommendations that come out of these groups go to the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission, and that is the final decision-making body. So either the stakeholder advisory group or the technical work group do not have any decision-making authority. They're just developing recommendations to send to the Parks and Wildlife Commission. And before I jump into some of the recommendations that have been finalized, I do want to make sure and mention a current regulatory change that Colorado Parks and Wildlife is considering. This was presented at the commission meeting a couple of weeks ago. And what it refers to is basically it makes it lawful for livestock owners or their agents to use hazing techniques when necessary to prevent or reduce injury from wolves. Because the current regulatory framework in Colorado, wolves are an endangered species per the state list, so it's illegal to harass them. And with wolves moving into the state and the proactive non-lethal measures to try and keep wolves from interacting or depredating on livestock is technically harassment and technically illegal. So I would the department spoke at the meeting there in support of this regulatory change to allow some hazing techniques so that the livestock producers are able to try and haze wolves away and keep them from impacting their livestock. So all that will, when they do a regulatory change for parks and wildlife, it's a two-step process. They introduce it at a commission meeting and then address it at the following one. So that should be addressed at the next Parks and Wildlife Commission meeting, and certainly encourage y'all to follow that and engage with it as that moves forward. Back to what recommendations have been made at this point. So these two groups have been meeting for the past, 4 months, I guess, maybe 5 months, and have talked about a lot of different topics, mainly centered on logistics for recommendations. So how things are going to be introduced, and I'll go real quickly through a list of things that these were actually presented. The recommendations from the two groups were presented to Parks and Wildlife up to a certain point, and then there's one group that's anyhow. I'll talk about some of those considerations. And one is, where are the wolves going to come from? Where are the donor populations? Of course, Wyoming, Idaho, Montana, all of those are on the table. Closer is certainly easier. A lot of it is going to be opportunistic. It's going to be where they're able to get the wolves. New Mexico is not, New Mexico and Arizona with the Mexican wolf is not being considered as a real viable alternative because we're not in Mexican wolf historic range up here. So that's just a different subspecies. The capture methods at the source, a wide everything that's in the playbook was pretty much recommended, whether it's helicopter capture or live trap, different things like that. The age ratios and color ratios and sex ratios. Of course, younger wolves, you don't want to turn a lot of old wolves out. No one had really strong feelings on the color ratios, and of course you'd want to at least a fair representation regarding sex ratios. Again, a lot of these are going to depend on what wolves are captured, because they don't line up as according to age and color and gender when being captured. So a lot of those are going to be just opportunistic. Genetic considerations are along the same thing. You want a kind of a wide variety of genetics in the population. Animal reputation was something that there were some specific recommendations on, and that's just if the wolves that are captured are wolves that are known problem wolves, and by problem wolves I mean one that depredate on livestock or that become acclimated to being around humans, that those would not be considered viable for release in Colorado. Of course, wanted to avoid disease issues at the source sites. Talked some about what to do with injured animals and transportation methods, and what specific drugs to use on the animals. And everyone agreed, these are all, this is something that the veterinarians that will be doing this and the wildlife biologists will be making these determinations on an as needed basis as they're working with them. The topic of collars or marking animals that are going to be reintroduced in the state came up, and the recommendation is that, especially in the early years of reintroductions, that all of the wolves that are captured and brought into the state and subsequently released, the plan is to have, or the recommendation is to have collars on every one of those, so that CPW can monitor their whereabouts and have that information. The reintroduction technique, and this is kind of talking about whether it's a hard release, whereas they simply open the gate and kick them out of the transport container, or if it's a soft release, and that is where they would build basically a pen that would hold the wolves, and by pen I don't mean something that I mean something of a decent size, where the the wolves would stay for an amount of time to get acclimated to the area before they release them. And the I guess kind of the preference there is hard release, because it's, for one, it's requires less resources. They don't have to build the pen and maintain the pen and keep eye on the pen. Some of the, I guess, points of contention or reasons for or against those are, with a hard release, the wolves will typically travel a bit further. When they're released, they're gonna start running as soon as that gate's open and they can get out of their cage. Whereas the soft release, they may tend to stick around the area more. So that, there will be some discretion, of course, with Parks and Wildlife as they're doing this. If they're releasing some wolves in an area where they would like them to stay around, they'll have the option to use a soft release. So time of year, it was mainly agreed that around the winter time would probably, for one, that's the most likely time when they'll be captured. So the availability of them will be good. That's probably what we're looking at. And all of those topics there was general agreement between the stakeholder advisory group and the technical work group. The technical work group put these together and sent them to the stakeholder group to consider. Beyond that, there were some topics which I'm going to kind of go into now, that where there wasn't complete agreement. And this, you can imagine, one of these is considerations for where wolves would be released or where they could be released. This was a model, a geospatial model was developed with some wildlife scientists at CSU, a habitat suitability model, if you will, that considered, of course, ungulate prey densities, of course, land use, meaning development, or is it open country, transportation, livestock presence. And that one's, there's not a real great layer for that. They considered federal grazing allotments, which, when we're talking about where the wolves will be reintroduced, which is west of the Continental Divide, there's grazing allotments all over that. And in the wintertime, where are the livestock at? A lot of times they'll come out of the high country. So all of these things were considered. It's like what's the old adage about models? All models are wrong. Some are useful. This one is a useful model. It does show some areas that it's more likely that there would be fewer conflicts. And that's the whole purpose of the model, is to find areas where there would be the least amount of conflict. So that, the use of this model and the specific, I guess, layers that went into it, there was some discussion about that, and that's where the agreement there wasn't a complete agreement because of that. The lack of a layer representing high recreation use areas on the public lands in the West was one particular area that thought it should have more representation of areas to avoid. And also, while ungulate species as prey were considered as a plus, it was brought up that some special species such as moose or bighorn sheep should potentially be in there as avoidance areas to not have wolves in those areas and negatively impact those populations. So lots of, there's talk about avoiding not releasing in areas within, a certain number of miles of the state borders. And that's just because they will be protected in Colorado. They're currently not protected in the other states. So a buffer from the Indian, the tribal areas in the southwest part of the state, a buffer from around those lands also was discussed. So there's still a lot of questions left to answer. The number of release sites, so how many different sites are they going to choose to put wolves out on the ground? Of course, these groups have wide representation, from those that are very, very much in favor of the wolf reintroduction to those that are not. And as you can imagine, there was a lot of disagreement on that. And I guess one of the points that I would try to make and bring into that's being considered is with the limited amount of resources that the state has, and by the state I really mean Colorado Parks and Wildlife, to respond to issues or requests or depredations or mainly problems that are created by the wolves. They don't want to spread themselves too thin. So that's certainly something that will be considered. Same applies for the pace of relief. How quickly or how many wolves do they want to release in the first year, the first couple of years? Year one, or how many? Year two, how many? Again, there is no set number, even as far as the recommendation that comes from this group, but that is certainly being discussed at this point. And those are the main things about the logistics of actually getting wolves on the ground. Still a lot of the more controversial pieces of that have yet to be settled as to what the actual recommendations will be to the Parks and Wildlife Commission when they make their final decisions. So those are some topics that the groups are still discussing and still working on developing recommendations on. The last meeting was the very, very beginning of discussion on a livestock depredation compensation plan. And that one is one where it's moving from the stakeholder advisory group back to the twigs. So we've worked on, I guess, the low-hanging fruit or the more generalities of a depredation compensation program. Some of the desired outcomes that were kind of agreed upon by the stakeholder advisory group members are that, like, livestock owners are not financially harmed, wolves are restored, conflicts are minimized, and there's trust and support and buy-in among all of the impacted communities, all the folks that are affected by this. Well, those are very good desired outcomes, and achieving those will be very difficult. So I want to go through it, and please, if anybody has any comments or questions about any of these topics, would be especially interested in your ideas, your opinions, because as I said, we are just scratching the surface of this topic with the advisory groups. And so I think part of my job in representing the department on that is to do some outreach. And so I'm using this to try and get some information and some feedback from y'all. And of course, it doesn't have to happen tonight. I think everybody, in fact, I will drop my email address into the chat so that everybody can see it. And you can certainly send any comments to me at any time. I can't type and talk at the same time. So let me .us, there we go. So that's in there. And at any time, please, anybody send some information. So this whole discussion about compensation started back in 2004. Colorado put together a wolf management group, knowing that at some point wolves would move into the state naturally, or suspecting that. And so that's where we started the conversation, was what were the recommendations from that group? And it was basically, for a confirmed loss, 100% of the fair market value should be compensated. For probable losses, 50% of the fair market value should be compensated. And within those short statements right there, there's a tremendous number of questions in that come up, and I'll kind of move into those. I just wanted to frame the conversation about what we talked about. Then we discussed some of the attributes of other states that have had wolves for a while, how their compensation programs are put together. And I guess my one comment on that, what other states are doing and have been doing, is that there's one thing that all of them have in common, and that's where in an area where a producer or producers are being severely, very heavily impacted by wolves, none of the other states' compensation programs make those producers whole. And I'm hopeful that we can get to the point, or at least get closer at achieving that in Colorado. Oh, appreciate that. Just that that picture, it was taken down by Creed. Bob just put a comment in about the picture in the background. That yeah, it is a nice area up there. I kind of want to go back. It's very pretty country. So want to talk a little bit about, I mentioned confirmed losses may be paid at 100% fair market value. So what is a confirmed loss? What is required to make it a confirmed loss? Who decides if it's a confirmed loss? All of these are questions that have yet to be answered. It would likely be CPW, USDA Wildlife Services that are making the call on these. But what specific things are required to show that it is a confirmed wolf loss and not a loss associated with, due to bears or lions or something other than that? So there's a lot of questions left to answer there. Another question that comes out of that, that easy statement of 100% of fair market value is, what is fair market value? I think you can look at certainly the livestock markets, the closest livestock markets, and establish a value. Just in some past experience that I've had with the Mexican wolf program down in New Mexico, there was a seed stock producer that consistently sold bull calves for $5,000 to $8,000, and he had two that were killed about 3 months before their sale. And the Wolf's Livestock Council down there elected to pay them based off the sales receipts from their previous, the history of what their livestock are worth. So fair market value is not an easy question, is not a 100% black and white question to answer. So that's something that will have to be considered moving into this. The whole process of confirmation will have to be worked out. Then there's probable losses. Where do you draw the line between what is a confirmed loss and what is a probable loss? Probable loss requires that you find a carcass, but it doesn't necessarily, what level of evidence makes it move from probable to confirmed? Lots of questions there. What level is a probable loss compensated at? The recommendations from 2004 and what many other states use is 50% compensation for probable. There was a lot of discussion that depending on where the trigger is, or where you go from probable to confirmed, it may need to be higher. And so kind of the consensus that came out of the stakeholder advisory group was for probable losses, some level that's at least 50% of the value of the livestock should be compensated. And again, that there's tremendous number of questions that come along with that. The next piece of the puzzle is missing livestock that were there, that no carcass was ever found, no evidence of them were ever found. What about those, and how will producers, of course, you're all very well aware, if you've got livestock, if your livestock are on a summer grazing allotment or something like that, with the pastures on some of these can be 3, 4, 5, 10,000 acres. So there's a lot of dark timber in there. It happens that the number that are turned out is rarely the number that are taken down off the hill. And how are those dealt with? It's been the experience with folks when wolves are introduced, when they move into an area, that the percent death loss tends to go up on their livestock. And how will those missing livestock be compensated for? Whole lot of questions with this. There's the idea of establishing a normal death loss for an operation through record keeping for years prior to wolf release was discussed, and comparing that with the average death, the percent death loss after wolves were released, and paying on the difference, that was discussed. There was concern that paying too much for missing livestock, or being too liberal with that payment, would disincentivize folks from implementing conflict mitigation strategies. So again, there's a lot of details that have to be worked out there. Another major source of loss for livestock producers that are impacted by wolves, or have wolves move in on them, are indirect losses. And this is impacts just to how well your livestock are doing. If they're are constantly being stressed by the presence of wolves, their weight gain's not going to be as good. This can impact conception rates. It can impact weaning weights, yearling weights, all of those different performance measures, which are the measures on which a livestock enterprise are paid. All of those can be negatively impacted just by the presence of wolves and that additional stress that they put on the livestock herds. Impossible to quantify this. It's extremely difficult, but it's real, and it's something that the group is looking at different ways to try and pay for it. Some different ideas to compensate are using multipliers or compensation ratios, and this would be, for instance, in the state of Wyoming, if certain conditions are met, for every confirmed kill that is made on a ranch, they use a multiplier of 7. So they pay for 7 times the number of confirmed kills. And that's meant to address the missing livestock and those other losses that are not quantifiable. So that's something that's being discussed. There's no agreement on how, what a multiplier would look like for Colorado, or if there should be one for Colorado. But it's being discussed. A general payment for presence, or if, and by that I mean if a particular ranch has documented wolf presence on them, that some type of payment could be made to just recognize and accept that there are impacts that are happening. So if wolves have camped out and have den sites and rendezvous sites and are raising pups on a particular ranch and staying around there, paying that producer. Again, many more questions than answers on each of these components of a compensation program. And the last component of the program that I want to mention that hasn't been figured out yet, which is definitely one of the most important pieces of the puzzle, is funding. Where are the dollars going to come from to fund this compensation program? We don't really even know what amount is needed at this point. Everyone agrees there should be funding for it, but no real sources of that have currently been identified. But everything has been discussed, from general fund appropriations from the legislature to private donations. So all of those are on the table and being discussed, and the devils that are hiding within all of those details will be the topic of discussion throughout the next kind of year as these two groups are working on that. And just for a little bit of timeline, by this time next year, they want to have, Colorado Parks and Wildlife wants to have a draft wolf management plan ready to go out to the public for public comment by this time next year. And then, so moving in through the spring of 23, right? 21, yeah, 22, into the spring of 23. By the summer, they want to have that wolf plan pretty much finalized, so that to be in compliance with the statute as it was passed through the ballot measure, that in the winter of the beginning of that winter in 23, that they can start with reintroductions at that time. So that, in a nutshell, is where things currently stand regarding the wolf reintroduction effort in Colorado. And I see a question just came up. And so the question is, how long after the wolves are released are they going to offer compensation? And so that's yet to be determined, but it's a very good question, and it has been discussed. And there has not been any. So if you're familiar with Colorado Parks and Wildlife's current big game compensation program, they compensate for impacts from big game animals. And thus far the discussion has been, once a wolf compensation program or methods to compensate for impacts from wolves is put into place, there is no desire, or I guess no intent for it to ever go away. That it, if way down the road, if wolves were ever, and this is a big if wolves were ever, considered a big game animal, meaning that they were hunted, they may be just rolled into that particular program. So it's something that I think it'll be a dynamic, evolving compensation program for many years, but there's no intent has been expressed for it to ever go away once it's started, though it may change a little bit. And with that, I don't have any other. I talked for a long time, and I'm sure all y'all are probably already asleep. But does anybody have any other questions? I should be happy to answer them. And if not, I would certainly want to leave the request that as you mull these things over and think about, your operations, and if wolves moved in on you, what, another predator comes into the mix, what would you like to see in a compensation program? And please share those thoughts with me, and I'll definitely try and make sure that they're included in the conversations as we move forward. But Bobby, that's pretty much all I had for this evening, unless anybody has any more questions.
Last call for any questions for Les. Unless if you, as things come across, if you can share with me too, as you always have,
Absolutely.
I'll make sure that I can get it out to everyone as well. So we keep everything that you talked about, keep that communication very open and alive with all of the local producers, supervisors in the district. So I really appreciate that.
Most definitely, Bobby, that we appreciate that from the department. We appreciate the being able to work through CACD to get out the information to the district, because I think I've said this before. I see the districts are our connection to the producers on the ground, and that two-way communication is so incredibly important to us doing our jobs the way we ought to. So definitely we'll keep the information headed that way.
All right, well, we really appreciate it. And I just want to thank you again, Les, and Cindy, thank you, and Commissioner Greenberg for joining us tonight and giving us your evening and allowing us to get this information from you, ask questions, and we really appreciate it. We appreciate the partnership, and I just want to let everybody know that real quick, Cindy, did you want to say anything before I close it out?
I'm fine. No, I was just
Okay.
putting my camera on to acknowledge.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Thank you so much. And the same to Cindy, if there's anything that I can get from you to share with the districts, and I'll share this video once it's ready also, and make sure it gets out to those folks who were not able to join us tonight.